If you've ever wondered what happens when a weak species finally runs out of patience, stay until the end. Like and subscribe. It actually helps more than you'd think. The Ascendant Concorde had committed 600 capital warships to hunt down a single human being. 600. Enough firepower to crack open a star system like an egg. All of it aimed at one man. On the bridge of the dreadnought Severance, High Marshal Drask stared at the tactical plot, his talons drumming an uneven rhythm against the armrest. 4 rotations ago, the entire Concorde Senate would have laughed at this deployment. 4 rotations ago, humanity was the galaxy's punchline, a soft, biddable species good for hauling cargo and absorbing bad trade deals. That was before the Aldrin incident. That was before the Concorde learned what a species born on a death world actually is, underneath the politeness. Drask pulled up the target file one last time. A human male, designation Ezra Voss. No rank, no title, no noble house behind his name. According to the Compact's own labor registry, he was a propulsion technician on a third-tier freight hauler called the Last Embers. A nobody. For 70 cycles, that was the human story the galaxy believed. When the Sol Compact first made contact with the Ascendant Concorde, they were almost embarrassingly accommodating. They signed away mineral rights without a fight. They absorbed insult after insult at the negotiating table with nothing but a polite nod. The Concorde, drunk on its own self-image, wrote one word into every internal briefing about humanity: docile. That assumption produced the Aldrin Accords, a trade agreement so lopsided it was functionally indentured servitude with better branding. The humans signed it anyway. For 70 years, human freighters arrived on schedule, holds full of refined ore and precision electronics, even as the Concorde skimmed off administrative fees that grew a little larger every cycle. There was exactly one detail the Concorde's analysts flagged and then dismissed. Humans always insisted on crude deliveries. No drone drops. No remote manifests. A human face, every single time, at every single station. The Concorde decided this was a quaint cultural tick, humans needing the validation of a face-to-face transaction. They were half right. It was never about validation. It was reconnaissance. Every face-to-face handoff was a human counting guards, mapping corridors, logging shift rotations. They weren't being polite. They were taking inventory of the people who might one day need to be removed. It started at Aldrin Station. The freighter Last Embers docked with a full hold of processed titanium. The station's commander, a Concorde officer named Threll, decided on a whim to reinterpret the inspection protocol. Under the cover of a routine security sweep, he ordered the cargo seized and the crew marched toward the detention block. It was piracy with paperwork attached. Captain Mara Linfield, a weathered woman with 20 years of quiet freight runs behind her, watched alien rifles level at her crew. Her face stayed flat. Her eyes did not. "Is there a problem, human?" Threll asked, his mandibles clicking with amusement. "No problem," Mara said softly. "I just want to be sure you understand what you're choosing right now." "I understand perfectly," Threll snapped. Mara nodded once. She reached into her jacket, removed a small encrypted relay, and snapped it cleanly in half. The guards laughed. They thought it was theater, a small, useless act of defiance from a powerless woman. They didn't know it was a dead man's trigger. A single binary pulse, fired to coordinates the Concorde had never mapped, carrying 3 words: "The Accords are void." Ezra Voss, the quiet propulsion tech, was thrown into cell block C with 11 others. The door was rated to hold apex predators from a dozen worlds, 17 independent encryption layers, full biometric lockout. Nobody bothered to double-check it. Why would they? These were just humans. For 19 hours, the prisoners sat in silence, and on the monitors, they looked beaten. At 3:51 station time, Ezra stood up. He walked to the door and ran 2 fingers along its seam with the unhurried focus of a man checking a recipe. Using a fingernail and the foil wrapper of a ration bar, he started working the lock. It took him 51 seconds. By the time station security flagged the anomaly, the humans were already gone from the cell, and they hadn't gone for the escape pods. They'd gone for the environmental control room. What followed was 26 minutes that the Concorde would later refuse to release publicly. The humans never touched the armory's pulse rifles. Instead, Ezra rerouted the station's atmospheric scrubbers, repurposed the waste reclamation lines, and turned the blast doors into hydraulic presses. No screaming. No torture. Just 12 humans moving through 400 armed soldiers the way a thresher moves through wheat, using the station's own bones against it. Aldrin Station was the spark. It was not the fire. 3 days later, in the Vales Reach system, the Kestrel Trade Consortium, 39 heavily armed commercial military hybrid vessels, sat at anchor, confident behind their shielding and their political cover. These were the financiers who'd underpaid human colonies for decades and quietly throttled medical shipments during the Greywater Plague to protect their margins. A scout ship checking in on the fleet found a graveyard instead. 39 ships, completely dark. No hull breaches. No plasma scarring. No debris. Weapons fully charged. Shields fully powered. Engines fully cold. Boarding parties found the crews seated at their stations, hands resting on consoles, faces calm. Not killed. Stopped. As if something had walked the corridors, exhaled once, and moved on. Security footage from the flagship told the story the Concorde didn't want told. A single human, biometrics confirmed, Ezra Voss, walked the main corridor in a scuffed gray technician's jumpsuit. No armor. No weapon. Every soldier who closed within 10 meters of him simply folded to the deck before they could fire a shot. He never looked at them. He just walked. Before the last ship went dark, a single broadcast hit every Concorde frequency in the sector. The Accords are void. We remember everything. Overnight, humanity disappeared from the galactic economy like a held breath let out. Trade routes went dark. Diplomats packed quietly and left without farewells. Outer Rim labor colonies, home to millions, emptied within a day. No convoy, no ship seen leaving, no trace. They didn't declare war. They simply stopped being visible. That silence terrified the Concorde more than any fleet could have. For 2 cycles, the Senate lived in low-grade panic, repositioning ships, rewriting security codes, scanning empty space for an enemy that wasn't there. Then the disappearances started. A patrol cutter missed a check-in. A merchant vessel vanished mid-jump. A mining outpost went dark between shift changes. The pattern was simple. Every vanished ship, every silenced outpost, belonged to someone who had profited from human labor. The Concorde tried to blame raiders. They tried to blame equipment failure. Then the Mirith Collective found something that ended the denial for good. A stealth object the size of a dreadnought hiding in an asteroid field, radiating no heat, no signal, nothing. Across its hull, in flawless Mirith script, "We have not forgotten what you did to our children." The medical ship that found it tried to flee. Its warp drive didn't break. It simply stopped, like a held breath. The last transmission anyone heard from that crew was a whisper. "There's a human aboard. He isn't armed. He's just walking. And everyone he passes stops." That was the line the Concorde couldn't uncross. This wasn't politics anymore. It was existential. So they built the largest single-purpose war fleet in their history. 600 warships. Planet-cracking ordnance. Quantum tracking arrays sensitive enough to taste a single human's bioprint across a star system. 600 ships, hunting one man named Ezra Voss. High Marshal Drask spread his forces across 19 systems, confident no organism alive could slip a net that tight. On day 5, the cruiser Talon's reach vanished from the outer perimeter. No distress call, no wreckage. When Drask scouts reached its last known position, they found a single asteroid, and on it, carved with surgical precision, "Marshal Drask, you're hunting the wrong thing." EV, Day 9. A drifting cargo hull, message carved into the plating. Beautiful ship design, Marshal. I always respected Concorde engineering. Day 15. The crew of the Ashward Vigil fought well. They deserved better orders. Day 22. Do you know what your government did to the colony convoy bound for New Geneva? I do. I have the manifest. This wasn't a hunt anymore. It was a trial, and Ezra Voss was reading the charges into the record one ship at a time. The Ashward Vigil had fired on a human medical convoy. The Iron Verdict had glassed a compact research outpost. He knew every name, every order, every cover-up buried in Concorde archives that were supposed to be unbreakable. By day 35, 600 ships had become 410. Captains were requesting reassignment. Crews were unraveling. Then came the break the Concorde had been praying for. The scout ship Pale Lantern picked up a massive human energy signature in the Calder's drift system. Drask didn't hesitate. He jumped every remaining ship, 230 capital vessels, straight into the system, weapons hot. They emerged in the shadow of twin gas giants, and there, sitting motionless in open space, was one small human vessel. It wasn't running. It was waiting. "Open a channel," Drask ordered, his claws shaking against the console. Ezra Voss's face filled the main screen. Unremarkable features. Tired eyes that looked like they'd been carrying something heavy for a very long time. "Marshal Drask," Ezra said, calm as still water. "Thank you for coming. We should talk." "Surrender," Drask barked, reaching for authority he no longer felt. "You're outnumbered 230 to 1. Ezra almost smiled. "Are you sure about that?" The tactical display lit up red from edge to edge. Hundreds of massive signatures bloomed into existence around the Concorde fleet. Not converted freighters, not improvised militia ships. Sleek, matte black leviathans that reflected no light, bled no waste heat, and carried weapon geometries that shouldn't have been physically possible. "Where did these come from?" Drask whispered. "We've been busy during our 70 years of peaceful cooperation," Ezra said. "Did you think we forgot how to build things while we were busy smiling and signing your paperwork? Did you think a species that survived Earth would forget how to make teeth?" "This is an act of war," Drask said. Ezra shook his head once. "No, Marshal. This is an act of justice. War means both sides have a chance." For 5 hours, the two fleets sat motionless, staring at each other across the dark. Drask's nerve broke first. "All ships, weapons free. Fire." The engagement lasted 3 minutes and 11 seconds. The Concorde fleet emptied everything it had: torpedoes, antimatter charges, full pulse cannon batteries, enough output to crack a moon. When the light faded, the human ships were untouched. The weapons' fire passed through their hulls like light through fog. Whatever the shielding was, it didn't absorb energy. It simply declined to acknowledge it. Then the humans answered. No return fire. No missiles. They simply reached, localized gravitic fields closing around Concorde dreadnoughts and folding them like wet paper. 5-kilometer warships crumpled with no detectable energy discharge. Crews found themselves ejected into escape pods as their ships dissolved around them in eerie silence. In under 10 minutes, the largest fleet the Concorde had ever assembled was scrap, drifting in the dark. Marshal Drask found himself alone in an emergency pod, watching Ezra's ship close the distance with quiet, unhurried grace. The airlock cycled open, and Ezra stepped through, smaller than Drask, unarmored, almost unremarkable. And yet the air around him felt thin, like standing too close to something far heavier than its size suggested. "What are you?" Drask asked, his back against the pod wall. "I'm what happens when a patient species gets pushed past the point of return," Ezra said. "I'm what we become when you take our colonies, profit off our compliance, and expect a thank you note for it." The Senate didn't know what Threll. The Senate knew everything. Ezra cut in, voice dropping to something cold and final. Every theft was logged. Every atrocity had a report filed and quietly buried. You thought we were too slow to read between the lines. You mistook our patience for stupidity. Ezra stepped back and gestured to the open airlock. "I'm offering you a choice, Marshal. Come with me. See what we actually built while you weren't watching. Help us rebuild something better than the Concorde ever was. Or stay in this pod. 40 days of life support. Plenty of time to think about exactly what kind of galaxy you helped make." Drask looked out at the wreckage of his fleet, then back at the quiet man in front of him. He followed Ezra onto the ship. As they jumped to hyperspace, leaving the graveyard behind, Drask finally saw where they were headed. A hidden network of 14 fully industrialized worlds, shipyards strung between planets like glittering thread, and training grounds beneath artificial suns holding more soldiers than the entire Concorde had ever fielded. Humanity had never been submitting. They had been waiting to see if the galaxy was worth saving. The waiting was over. If Ezra Voss's story hit different, drop a comment with your favorite line, and stick around, because the Concorde Senate isn't done making mistakes yet. Part 2 coming soon.